Greetings and welcome. My name is Russell Paul Arthur. I am the creator of Grace Sovereignty Academy and a certified practitioner of sovereign law. And you are here with me for special access to learn more about a sovereign document and procedure known as the Declaration of Status. In this video, we shall do a mini presentation on the Declaration of Status so that you fully understand why this document and procedure is what initiates a transition from citizenship to sovereignty. And below on this webpage, you can view the actual declaration to get a more in-depth understanding of what this document entails. And if you want to learn more about how you can achieve personal sovereignty and how personal sovereignty will benefit your life within a world that's taking more of your freedoms, values and rights away, then please do register for my free live and interactive webinar where you can join me and together we shall do a deeper dive into how it is possible for you to become sovereign and how our Grace Sovereignty Academy can teach you the knowledge, skills and lawful procedures to transition from citizenship to sovereignty. So let's jump straight into this mini presentation where you shall learn about the document and procedure known as the Declaration of Status. And we begin with presentation slide number 1. The Declaration of Status is a pivotal document and procedure that initiates the transition from citizenship to sovereignty. The Declaration of Status is a sovereign document that we issue to the Crown and State to officially and lawfully declare two things: that we are rescinding and cancelling citizenship, and we are correcting our status in relation to the Crown and State by asserting our inherent and natural rights as a living man or woman to hold sovereign authority in this world. The Declaration of Status is a comprehensive document that is issued as an adjudicated fact of law that must be recognised by the Crown and State, where the Crown and State must accept and honour our will and intention to remove our life and estate from legal bondage to the Crown and State, so that we can restore our natural and inherent freedoms and rights to live as free and independent men and women. And we issue this document as a sovereign authority. This means we do not ask for permission to leave the Crown and State. We are acting as true sovereigns to notify the Crown and State that it is our free will and intention to no longer participate as a citizen in their corrupt system of legal bondage and servitude. Now, the Declaration of Status as a means to cancel citizenship is different to using a public procedure to cancel citizenship. As a citizen of the state, it is possible to change your status in relation to the state with a public form and legal procedure, where you can change your status within the parameters of a legal framework. As a sovereign, we do not use any public forms or legal procedures to change our status. We do not become a non-citizen, expatriate, asylum, stateless person, non-resident, or any other type of legal status as defined by the Crown and State, as these types of status are legal definitions and titles that keep our life in legal bondage and servitude to the Crown and its legal system. The whole point of sovereignty is to leave the system of the Crown and State, is to unwind from all forms of legal bondage. And we achieve that with the Declaration of Status as a sovereign document that we issue to assert our sovereign status and standing that is independent from the Crown and State. So now that you have an overview of the purpose of the Declaration of Status, let's examine the different components of this declaration. The Declaration of Status is a comprehensive package of many documents that have different purposes and outcomes when it comes to cancelling citizenship as we assert sovereign status and standing in this world. As part of the Declaration of Status, there are two documents known as the Declaration and a supporting brief. The Declaration is a document that informs the Crown and State how our actual life was captured by the Crown and State at the point of birth registration, and how our actual life was placed into the diminished legal status of citizenship, and how this all happened as a result of deception and forced compliance that was imposed by the Crown and State. The Declaration makes several key statements to inform the Crown and State that we are aware of the facts, how at birth registration our life was indentured to citizenship and converted into a corporate legal person and entity known as the citizen. The Declaration defines how our actual life became a bonded surety to the citizen as a commercial franchise of the state. The Declaration states how our actual life has been secured as chattel property of the state and used to underwrite the debt-based financial system. In this document, we make declarations to confirm how our natural and inherent freedoms and rights were removed and replaced with civil rights that really are privileges granted by the state, and how we have been reduced to the status of a landless serf and civilian that operates within a fictional public domain with diminished freedoms and rights that can be removed by the state at any time, and how we have been deemed by the Crown and State as an enemy of the state anytime we do not conform with or trespass against the rules and regulations of the Crown and State, and how we have unknowingly at birth registration abandoned the equity and rights of our life and estate, and how the value of our life and estate has been captured and contained into a public trust arrangement that is held by HM Treasury, and how this has all happened because we unknowingly at birth registration formed an undisclosed and therefore fraudulent contract with the Crown and State, known as an adhesion contract, that forever bonded our life to all the legislations and acts created by the Crown and State that has been designed to control and extort the value of our life and estate. In the Declaration document, we inform the Crown and State that we now come forward to exercise our sovereign authority and rights to correct our status in relation to the Crown and State, to undo what has been done, to correct the mistake and right the wrong, doing so in accordance with the law of equity. Now, when you read this document, you will notice the Declaration is created as an archetype act of state. The word archetype means the original from which a copy is made, and the act of state means a principle in international law whereby the act is executed in its own territory and cannot be challenged by the courts of another state or territory. Therefore, the Declaration is clearly informing the Crown and State that we are a sovereign authority who acts within our own private and sovereign venue and jurisdiction that is free and independent to the venue and jurisdiction of the Crown and State. That brings us to the supporting brief document. The supporting brief is a document with evidence and proof that backs all the claims that we have stated in our declaration. The supporting brief document outlines all the historical evidence of all the conquests, wars, conflicts, legislations and acts that have been imposed throughout recent history where there has been an organised coalition of royalty and religion between sovereign crowns. These are foreign entities that went on a military campaign to capture the land, people and resources of the British Isles into a corporate legal system and hierarchy of top-down control and extortion. The supporting brief is what proves how our ancestors were forced to abandon their natural and inherent freedoms and rights against their own free will choice and good conscience under the threat of penalty and death as imposed by the Crown. The supporting brief provides undeniable and irrefutable evidence, proof, facts and a legal basis to substantiate our inherent authority and right to correct and restore our status, to become sovereign and whole as living men and women, as opposed to legal entities known as citizens who are slaves to the system. In this next slide, I show how, as part of the Declaration of Status, there are 5 important documents that we must issue that expresses our will and intention to sever and separate our actual life as a living man or woman from the corporate legal entities known as the citizen, the crown, and the state. Because in the Declaration of Status, we must prove and define why our status as a living man or woman with sovereign authority and status is different to the corporate legal person and entity known as the citizen of the state. We must give clear distinctions as to why it is possible for the living man or woman to sever and separate his or her life from the citizen. And this is achieved with the 5 following documents that forms the Declaration of Status. We have a document known as the rescission of signatures that rescinds our signature from all documents that we have ever created in the name of the citizen. Throughout our entire lifetime, we have all signed many legal documents in the name of the citizen. These legal documents are all the public forms, applications, registrations, trusts and contracts that we have all signed in order to access and gain the benefit of some type of public service. These legal documents include the birth certificate, national insurance, taxpayer reference numbers, licenses, permits, passports, registrations, financial contracts and corporate contracts that all represents our legal bondage and servitude to the corporate legal system of the Crown and State. And why is it important to rescind and remove our signature from these documents? Because our signature represents the will and intention of our life force. Our signature is the sign of our nature as a living man or woman. Our signature is what activates a legal document. Our signature is what binds our actual life force to the terms and conditions that are stated in a legal document. When we apply our signature to a legal document, we give our consent for our actual life as a living man or woman to be the bonded surety and liable party for the citizen who is named in the legal document, the citizen that is a legal entity and a state-owned title and franchise. We are not the citizen. We are not legal entities. We are all men and women with living substance. But we are the bonded surety that gives life and value to the citizen as we sign and register for public services in the name of the citizen. This means for a living man or woman to sever and separate his or her actual life from the citizen, the living man or woman must rescind all signatures that have been applied to all documents throughout his or her entire lifetime. The act of rescission means to cancel, revoke, remove consent and terminate our position and role as the bonded surety and guarantor to all the commitments, implications, obligations and liabilities of the citizen. And we can rescind and remove our signature in accordance with the law of equity that provides remedy to right a wrong. Once our signature has been rescinded from all the legal documents, we have released our life from legal bondage to the terms and obligations of those documents. Next, we have a document for disclaiming all public trusts. We need to disclaim public trusts because the Crown and State has captured our life and estate into a public trust arrangement, where the value and rights of our life and estate are part of the Crown Commonwealth. The Crown Commonwealth is a Crown Corporation sole, which is a sovereign trust that is governed by HM Treasury. The citizen, as a state-owned legal franchise, has been designated as a trustee in this public trust arrangement. In trust law, a trustee is the one who holds all the legal titles, responsibilities, and liabilities for the management of the property of a trust. The value and rights of our life and estate have been secured by the Crown and State as property of a public trust. All legal documents issued by the Crown and State, including all legal documents issued by state agencies, they become property secured in a public trust. The citizen as a trustee holds all the legal documents as bonds and titles, and this includes the birth certificate, national insurance, driver's licenses, passport, incorporation certificates, and property titles. And where the citizen is responsible and liable for all the rules, regulations, and tax codes that are attached to those legal documents. The citizen as a trustee holds the liability and must settle all the claims, charges, fees, penalties, taxes, and debts attached to any instrument, attached to any contract or bill that is issued by the Crown, State, or a public agency. And therefore, to sever and separate our life from the Crown and State, we must officially and lawfully remove our life from the position of being a trustee in any and all public trust arrangements. We must issue a disclaimer of trusteeship to officially disclaim the position of trustee in any and all public trust arrangements. Disclaim means to refuse the position and decline responsibility. We must also deny and terminate any and all consent to all and any claims, liabilities, capacities, or attachments made against us on the assumption that we are a trustee in public trust matters. That brings us to a document known as the exemption from withholding. As part of the declaration of status, we issue a document known as the exemption from withholding to notify the Crown and State that as a living man or woman we are exempt from tax withholding. In this document, we affirm the facts that proves we are a living man or woman and not a statutory person, citizen, resident, national, non-citizen, resident alien, taxpayer, or non-taxpayer of the nation state. In this document, we affirm in our corrected sovereign status that we are no longer liable for all the tax laws, codes, and rulings, and thus complete our detachment from the tax system. As a sovereign, we are no longer liable for tax because we are establishing our life and estate in a new private and sovereign venue and jurisdiction that is unbound and immune to all the tax laws, rules, regulations, and codes that only exist in the public domain and only apply to citizens, legal persons, and entities. With that said, although we shall no longer be a citizen with tax liability in the public domain, in our new capacity as a sovereign, we must still earn and receive money in the public domain. As a sovereign, we can claim money in its equitable nature. This means to receive money as equity and not as taxable income or earnings. We can secure money as untaxable equity and secure that equity as property of a private trust arrangement. Whereas a sovereign, we can receive money as a living beneficiary of the trust. Not paying tax is a lawful process that we execute by arranging an exemption from withholding with the Inland Revenue Service. Exemption from tax withholding means income tax will not be deducted from a wage or salary by the Inland Revenue. The Inland Revenue Service, we know, is a Crown agency that withholds tax from income and earnings. Tax withholding is where they deduct tax from income at the source of income before the individual receives the income, just like the PAYE scheme where you pay as you earn. And we can claim exemption from tax withholding for several reasons. As a living man or woman, we shall no longer engage with the commercial or corporate system as a registered tax-paying citizen. As a non-taxpayer, we can claim and place money into a private trust arrangement that only receives untaxable equity and does not receive taxable income. Next, we have a document known as the Declaration of Name. The Declaration of Name is another pivotal document that we issue to separate and sever our legal bondage to the Crown and State. The citizen, we both know, is a corporate legal person entity created, owned and controlled by the state. In law, the citizen is referred to as ons legis, which means a creature of law. This means the citizen is an entity and status defined by law and not a real man or woman of living substance. In order to correct our status, we must make a clear and lawful distinction between the name of the living man or woman and the name of the citizen. We must declare that the name of the citizen is represented by the all-caps surname, also known as the serf name or servant name. The surname is actually a state-created name and legal title that the state has created and issued to brand state property. The surname is a means to identify state-owned property and has derived from the Roman Napoleonic surname that was used in a past global campaign to capture the people of the land into a legal system controlled by religion and royalty. As part of the declaration of status, we must declare our sovereign name as being our first and middle names only that were given to us by our lawful parents as our true, official and proper name. A name that was not granted as a title by the Crown or State. We must declare that our sovereign name has no attachment or joinder to the all-caps name of the citizen. We must also make clear that the use of our sovereign name should in no way convey, purport, bond, register or attach our actual life as a living man or woman to the citizen, Crown or State. In the Declaration of Name document, we also include the fact that we have repurposed the family surname as a house name to represent our family lineage and heritage, where the new house name is not attached to the Crown and State. We should also claim that nobody except ourselves has the right to use the title of our sovereign name, and where any attempt by legalese or artifice made by any public agency or authority to attach a deed, title or bond to our sovereign name for the purpose of owning, controlling or extorting value from our life force will constitute as a violation of our free will, natural freedoms and rights, and would be the very definition of slavery. In Black's Law Dictionary 5th edition, a slave is defined as a person who is wholly subject to the will of another, one who has no freedom of action but whose person and services are wholly under the control of another, one who is under the power of a master and who belongs to him, so that the master may sell and dispose of his person, of his industry and of his labour, without his being able to do anything, have anything or acquire anything but what must belong to his master. Slavery, the condition of a slave, that civil relation in which one man has absolute power over the life, fortune and liberty of another. And when you understand how the Crown and State has paramount authority and control over your life and estate as a citizen, you will come to realise how, as a citizen, you are a slave to sovereign masters. That brings us to a document known as the Royal Denouncement. Our life and estate has been captured into a sovereign structure known as a Crown Corporation Sole that trades as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The United Kingdom is governed by a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy is a sovereign trust arrangement between royalty and religion, between the British Crown and the Holy See, aka the Triple Crown, Roman Catholic Church or the Holy Roman Empire. The monarchy is what captured the British Isles and its people many centuries ago into a sovereign trust arrangement. The monarchy is a sovereign trust that holds the Commonwealth, holds the land, people and resources of the nation state of the United Kingdom in a trust arrangement. The UK citizens have been deemed loyal subjects or inferior servants of the Crown that rules the monarchy. The monarchy has a royal house and crown that holds and administrates the office of the monarch as the head of state. We must therefore notify the current office holder and Prince-elect, or the King of the British monarch, that as a living man or woman with sovereign authority that we are severing all bondage and attachments to the Crown and monarchy. We must issue a royal denouncement to state our official rejection of the Crown and monarch's rulership over the land, people and resources of the United Kingdom. We must affirm our sovereign authority and independence from the Crown and monarch. In this document, we shall present facts to substantiate why the enthronement, coronation and proclamation of the current King of the Crown Commonwealth of Monarch is an illegitimate tenor based on false, exaggerated and unfounded claims of divine right to rule over others as granted by a God. We shall deem the monarch's claim of divine right to rule over others as a preposterous, false and a deceptive claim that has no integrity, credibility or standing in reality. We shall prove that we have every right to stand on this earth with equal divinity and sovereign authority and not as lesser beings or subjects to a false and deceptive claim made by a self-appointed royal crown and monarchy. We should inform the royal office holder of the crown that we are aware of the crown's relations, covenants and treaties with the Holy See. We shall state all the historical facts of how the triple crown of the Holy See and the royal crowns of England and Europe have throughout the past centuries colluded and engaged in organised crimes against humanity to conquer foreign lands, to capture the lives of innocent people into a corporate crown trust structure, where both royalty and religion have utilised brute force, coercion and deceptive measures to violate human freedoms and rights, as they have subjugated and deprived the men and women of the land from their natural birthright to live free and unencumbered. Once we have severed and separated all attachments and bonds to the citizen, crown and state as a living man or woman with sovereign authority and status, we shall return back to our original position before our life and estate was captured into legal bondage and servitude to the crown and state. As a living man or woman, we shall no longer be answerable, accountable or liable for any bonds, legislations, acts, claims or charges issued by the crown or state in the name of the citizen. We will have demonstrated and substantiated the fact that our life and estate, in other words, our freedoms, values and rights, are no longer attached as a bondage surety for the citizen and no longer in legal bondage to the crown and state. Moving on, as part of the Declaration of Status, the documentation package should also include 3 important documents that informs the crown and state that we are claiming all the equitable interests, all the equity and rights of the citizen, and converting the equity and rights of the citizen into a private estate trust that we control in the private as a sovereign. These 3 documents include a notice of private trust. We must notify the crown and state that we have created a private estate trust to hold and control the equitable interests of our life and estate as contained in the name of the citizen in the public trust arrangement. Once we have corrected our status and become sovereign, we can no longer operate as the citizen and we can no longer place our actual life back into legal bondage and servitude with the crown or state. However, the equity and rights of our life and estate are still wrapped up in the name of the citizen in a public trust arrangement with the crown and state. And we must still access all the public services that we all need to facilitate our life within the public domain. We must therefore convert the value and rights of our life and estate into a private trust arrangement that can be used to access public services. In this new private estate trust arrangement, we as a sovereign become the living beneficiary of the trust and we can access all the public services that we need through the new private trust without bonding our actual life back to the crown and state. Also issue a notice of acceptance of deed. The acceptance of deed is a document that affirms we have accepted and claimed the birth certificate as a deed and gift in equity. The birth certificate is a deed and bond that represents the equitable interests of our life and estate as it is contained in the public trust. All the value and rights of our life and estate as contained in the public trust are vested in the birth certificate. In the public trust arrangement, the citizen has been designated as the legal title holder of the birth certificate, and where our actual life was formerly the bonded surety for the citizen. This meant our life was indentured as a trustee with all the legal responsibilities to settle all the liabilities charged to the public trust, all the claims, debts, bills, charges, fees, fines and penalties, everything that gets charged to the citizen in the public trust arrangement. But now that we are correcting our status to come forward as a sovereign with paramount authority over the value and rights of our life and estate, we can now assert our paramount right to become the rightful holder of the equitable interests of our life and estate as they are vested in the birth certificate. We can accept and claim the birth certificate as ours to own and hold as a sovereign. And when we do accept and claim the birth certificate, we also accept and claim the equitable interests of our life and estate as vested in the certificate as bonded to the public trust account at HM Treasury. We should accept the birth certificate as a pure gift in accordance with the maxim of equity, where it states, equity will not perfect an imperfect gift. This means the official act of accepting the birth certificate as a gift is to perfect our claim to the equitable interests of our life and estate. In law, a gift must be officially accepted to make the acceptance of the gift a provable fact of law. And this happens when we issue the notice of deed. Once we have officially accepted the birth certificate, we become the exclusive and absolute owner and holder of all the equitable interests of our life and estate as they are vested in the birth certificate. We then have the authority and right to secure those equitable interests into a new private estate trust, so that we can own, hold and control those interests as private property of the trust. And this means we also must issue a document known as the Notice of Paramount Claim. We issue a Notice of Paramount Claim as documented record and proof that we have officially claimed the living substance of our body, bones, flesh, blood, DNA and our entire genetic lineage. By staking a paramount claim to our own life force, no other authority in this world can substantiate a claim to our life. In this notice, we also claim the life force of all our ancestors, from grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. We are also staking a claim to all the equitable interests of all the lives and estates of our ancestors that have been captured by the Crown and State over the centuries. The Commonwealth of the Crown and State has been consolidated over the centuries by the value of the lives and estates of our ancestors. The wealth of the Crown Commonwealth is a compounded total sum of all the value of all the people from centuries ago. In a Notice of Paramount Claim document, we are coming forth to stake our claim as the rightful heir and beneficiary to all the equitable interests of the ancestors in our genetic lineage that are contained by the Crown and State, so that we can secure those interests of our ancestors into the new private estate trust arrangement. In the Notice of Paramount Claim, we establish the fact that we are born from our parents as the immediate kin thereof, and that our substance of life was gifted to us through conception, as a fusion of our mother and father's will, flesh, blood and DNA. It was this fusion at conception that gifted us the genetic intelligence and coding that shaped our physical form and characteristic traits that we know and hold as our actual life. This means our actual life is the living proof that we are the one and only true owner of our life, and the one and only true living beneficiary with the inherent right to the equitable interests of our ancestors' lives and estates. This means that no other individual or authority could possibly stake the same claim unless they are a sibling or offspring that stands next in line and order of conception. In this notice, we shall irrevocably, uncontestably, and absolutely throughout all passage of space and time stake our paramount claim to have, own, hold, preserve and protect a divine signature of life and its unique ancestral lineage. Doing so with absolute sovereign authority that is free from any and all other claims. Doing so where the value and rights of our life and estate are our natural birthright to possess and hold without limitation, subjugation, bondage or subservience to any other claims, especially those made by the Crown and State. Therefore, we must deny it, reject and withdraw consent to any registration or deposit of our life and estate as a pledge, allegiance, security or bonded surety to any Crown, State, country, sovereign body, corporation, collective or individual in this world. This means our lawful and rightful claim to our life and estate will stand paramount above all other claims. And from that point onwards, we shall demand a cease and desist over anyone that attempts to trespass against our paramount claim over our own life and estate. Everyone else in this world must stand secondary and inferior to your paramount claim. Moving on, as part of the Declaration of Status, we must issue 4 important documents that informs the Crown and State that we have restored the nature and quality of our life and repositioned ourselves in relation to the Crown and State. And this includes a document known as the Release Without Consideration. We issue a release without consideration as a document to affirm our actual life as a living man or woman is no longer a bonded surety for the corporate legal entity known as the citizen of the state. As a living man or woman with sovereign status, we shall irrevocably terminate the guardian ward arrangement between our life and the Crown and State. We shall officially release and discharge our life from all the duties and obligations relating to all the public interests of the citizen. We issue a release without consideration because we do not request or receive any outstanding payments for the release of our life from citizenship. A citizen is a state-created entity entitled that belongs to the state. We as living men and women have no interests vested in the actual title of the citizen. The citizen as a title itself is a worthless entity and exists as a bankrupt debtor and franchise corporation of the state. Also in this document, we as a living man or woman shall also reinstate our natural freedoms, inherent rights and sovereign authority to self-determine, self-direct and self-govern our own life in accordance with our own personal conscience in relation to the divine source of creation, and reserve all the personal rights and property rights of our life and estate. And we include with this a deed of restitution. We issue a deed of restitution document to claim that we have restored our rightful status as a living being of earth with sovereign authority and determination over our own life. In this document, we affirm that we are not a corporate legal entity and concept that operates in a fictional containment field and jurisdiction known as the public domain that was created by the Crown and State. But indeed, we are a living man or woman that exists in flesh and blood on the real, organic and original jurisdiction of the land. We attest to now stand on the land of earth as a living being of the earth. Therefore, we cannot be mistaken for a fictional corporate legal personal entity within the public domain that has no real status or standing on the earth. We also absolve ourselves from all trespasses, debts and transgressions that occurred in the past when we acted as the citizen. And we decree that the Crown and State and its public authorities have no right to possess any legal claim over our life or estate. In this document, we should attest that we are fully competent to administer the affairs of our life and estate as a sovereign who is the sole heir and living beneficiary of our own life and estate, and where the Crown and State cannot continue as the de facto administrators of our life and estate without our consent and appointment to do so. We shall demand that our life and estate shall be restored back into wholeness, and that all previous and outstanding claims and debts attached to our life and estate are to be satisfied and settled, to leave us fully restored to life without any encumbrances or legal bonds to the Crown and State. Next, we have a document known as the Writ of Habeas Corpus. As part of the Declaration of Status, we issue a document known as the Writ of Habeas Corpus. This is a sacred writ that stems from the canon law of the Roman Catholic Church, a law that was instituted as the highest of highest laws of the land. The term habeas corpus comes from Latin and means that you have the body. This sacred writ is issued from one sovereign authority to another sovereign authority where there has been an unlawful detention of one of its members or subjects. This sacred writ is issued to the Crown and State as a court order that demands if you as a sovereign are unlawfully detained or imprisoned by the Crown and State, then you are to be brought before a judge or court to determine whether such action is truly lawful. This sacred writ is issued as a court order to ensure that you as a sovereign are not held in custody without sufficient legal cause, and is to prevent arbitrary or illegal imprisonment and to ensure there is a due process of law. On the basis that you as a living man or woman would exist and operate in your own private and sovereign venue and jurisdiction, as a foreign entity that travels internationally through the public venue and jurisdictions of other nation states, you do require the writ of habeas corpus to protect your life from any unlawful actions committed upon you by the authorities of those nation states, including the nation state of your homeland. This sacred writ shall protect you as a living man or woman from any attempts made by any public authority to detain or imprison you on the false basis that you are a citizen of their state or a foreigner that is subject to the authority of their venue and jurisdiction, which you are not as a sovereign. Once you have established sovereignty, any such claims and actions would be false and unlawful. And upon giving the public authorities proof that you are not a legal entity under their jurisdiction and to affirm your sovereign status, the public authorities must release your life. This sacred writ aligns with the principal fact that you would be a private member of our Grace Private Society and no longer a member of the general public of any nation state. Within the protective enclosure of our own private society, we have established our own Grace Private Court to protect all our private members from any unlawful claims or detentions made by any crowns, states, countries or sovereign bodies in this world, and where the writ of habeas corpus is our fundamental and constitutional safeguard against any unlawful detention. We must therefore inform the Crown and State that we have assembled as a collective society of men and women to form a private court, and where the issuance of the writ of habeas corpus from our private court is to assert our immunities and protections from any authority outside of our society. That brings us to a sovereign document known as the Declaration of Peace. Our intention is to establish sovereignty based on the principles of freedom, peace and prosperity. Once sovereign, we shall exist and operate within our own private and sovereign venue and jurisdiction that is independent to all other venues and jurisdictions of all crowns, nation states and sovereign bodies in this world. This means we are now foreign to all nation states, and all nation states of this world are under military occupation by the Crown and State and have been since the day of the conquests of the Roman Empire, religion and royalty. As part of the Declaration of Status procedure, we are claiming and asserting sovereignty as an act of severance and separation from all crowns and nation states, and where these sovereign bodies could perceive our new status and actions as a potential threat to their public domain and system of control and extortion. The state has many legislations and acts to determine and define who is an enemy of the state and where the state can utilise any means necessary to oppress and contain any perceived threats to national security. With this in mind, we must express our peaceful intentions, offer reassurance and establish a peaceful treaty with all mankind, crowns, states and public authorities of this world. By declaring peace, we can officially and lawfully remove ourselves from any perceived hostilities or threats. We express our peaceful intentions in the document known as the Declaration of Peace that affirms our sovereign status and standing in this world as someone who operates in peace, at peace and for peace. We officially declare that we shall cease, refrain and not participate in any hostilities, aggressions, conflict, attacks or wars against any crown, state, sovereign body or any individual or collective that is part of the public domain. We shall claim to be a non-belligerent, non-combatant and non-enemy of all nation states. We are effectively removing ourselves from the battlefield, and we shall adopt a neutral and peaceful stance in all worldly affairs. We shall declare that we stand within the venue and jurisdiction of Grace Private Society, a society that stands for peace. And we shall offer reassurance that should we mistakenly and unintentionally cause any wrongdoing or harm in this world, that we shall endeavour to correct such error and make amends to the injured party. We also give notice to any crowns, states, governments, officers, agents and any military forces to abolish their duty under martial law in accordance with this Treaty of Peace, where they can no longer act with vigilance or belligerence towards us. This Declaration of Peace shall also be affirmed in accordance with the International Flag of Peace, and this means we are protected by the doctrine of safe harbour, passage and hospitality when conducting the international affairs of our life and estate across all nation states worldwide. That brings us to the final presentation slide, where together we shall examine why and how we issue the Declaration of Status to the high office holders of the Crown and State to establish our sovereign status and standing. We begin with the fact that we must have the Declaration of Status notarized and legalized. The Declaration of Status is a package of documents that shall be issued to the highest office holders of the Crown and State, and therefore we must have the Declaration of Status authenticated as a fact of law, so it will be recognised and accepted by the Crown and State. We first have the Declaration of Status authenticated by a public notary. A public notary is a state-approved agent with the authority to recognise and authenticate documents in the public. We need a public notary to act as a public witness to us autographing the declaration to affirm and authenticate that we have indeed created the declaration as our will and testament. The declaration is an affidavit of truth. An affidavit is a sworn statement made under oath and witnessed by an authorised notary to become a legalised document that is accepted in a court as a fact of law. Once the declaration has been witnessed by a public notary, we must have the declaration authenticated by the UK Legalisation Office of the nation state. This means we have the declaration recognised and accepted as a true, authentic and lawful document at state level. Through the legalisation of the declaration, we obtain an apostille certificate. This means the declaration is recognised in other countries as per the Hague Convention Treaty. Once the declaration has been authenticated by the Legalisation Office, we shall have a declaration that is backed by the full faith and credit of the nation state and mandatory for all the public agencies and authorities of the Crown and State to acknowledge and accept without question or refute. Furthermore, the Declaration of Status will be recognised and issued by our own Grace Private Court. The declaration shall be recognised and recorded in our own private court as an adjudicated fact of law, and where that recognition stands as recorded proof that you have corrected your status to hold sovereignty. Your declaration of status will be a testament made amongst your living peers within the protected and sovereign enclosure of Grace Private Society and our private judiciary, where you are officially and lawfully recognised and accepted as a living being of earth. Once the declaration of status is recognised and recorded in our own private court of law and recognised and accepted as a fact of law within the public domain, we can then issue the declaration of status to the Crown and State. We send the declaration of status to 10 different leaders of the Crown and State. These are the high office holders and representatives of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Those who are charged with the administration of our life and estate as a citizen and member of the state. And here are the 10 recipients of the Declaration of Status. We have the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. The British Prime Minister is the central figurehead and leader of the nation state and UK government. We have the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. The UK Secretary of State is responsible for overseeing the welfare system, including the benefits, pensions and employment support for citizens. We have the Secretary of State for the Home Department, also known as the Home Secretary, who is responsible for the internal affairs of the state, such as immigration, policing, national security and crime prevention. Then we have the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. This Secretary is responsible for managing the country's foreign relations, international development, diplomatic efforts and for promoting British interests abroad. We have the Chancellor of the Exchequer. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is responsible for overseeing the UK's economic and financial matters, including setting the budget, managing public spending and shaping tax and fiscal policy. We have the Chief Executive and First Permanent Secretary of HMRC. This Chief Executive is responsible for leading the UK's tax authority, overseeing the collection of taxes, administration of customs and welfare payments and ensuring compliance with tax laws. Next up we have the Secretary to the UK Treasury, also known as the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury and the most senior civil servant, who is responsible for overseeing the management of public finances, advising ministers and ensuring effective implementation of economic and fiscal policy. That brings us to the Lord Mayor for the City of London. The Lord Mayor is the ceremonial head of the City of London Corporation and is responsible for representing interests, promoting the financial sector and acting as an ambassador for the city's businesses, both nationally and internationally. Which brings us to the Monarch of the United Kingdom and Head of State. The Monarch of the United Kingdom serves as the Head of State, controls the UK government, grants royal assent to laws and represents the nation state internationally. And finally, we have the office of the Archbishop of Canterbury. This is where the most senior cleric of the Church of England resides as a franchise of the Holy See and is responsible for overseeing the Church's doctrines, ceremonies and clergy and for advising the monarch on all religious matters. Once we have issued the Declaration of Status to the leaders and representatives of the Crown and State to give notification and establish the lawful facts and basis that substantiates our rescission from citizenship and status correction to stand with sovereign authority and independence, we have set a new precedent of how we shall exist and operate in this world, where our declaration and new sovereign status is recognised and accepted by the Crown and State as a fact of law and sustains without rebuttal or lawful refutation. And from that point onwards, we have set in motion the next lawful procedure that we must undertake to fully transition from citizenship to sovereignty. We must enact lawful procedures to restructure and protect the freedoms, values and rights of our life and estate into what is known as a private estate trust and a private estate structure. And that brings me to the end of this mini presentation. You now know about the lawful document and procedure known as the Declaration of Status that heralds a transition from citizenship to sovereignty And this is a procedure amongst many other procedures that we teach our students inside Grace Sovereignty Academy. So please do view the declaration document below this video, and if you are curious to learn more about the transition from citizenship to sovereignty and learn more about our Grace Sovereignty Academy, then please do register for my free webinar. This is a live and interactive webinar where I can show you more about how we transition to sovereignty and why sovereignty benefits your life going forward in a world of ever-increasing mechanisms of control and extortion that is limiting and restricting your life. And that's it from me. Thanks for being here today. It has been my intention to empower you with information that can radically upgrade your perception and quality of life. And I wish you and yours the very best. Take care for now.